So Perry, it's lovely to see you. I hope you can. Do you want to take a calming breath? Breathing in.
Thank you.
So this is the world we're in now, right? Where, you know, it is amazing that we can have this transatlantic conversation and all of us and three different folks, and you know, and things do happen as part of the humanity of existence here. So welcome, Perry.
You make me feel better about that. Thank you very much, Ken and Amanda, for filling in.
You know, we were thinking before we came on, Ken and I were like, what do we do? Do we go on and say, Perry's not here, goodbye? And then we thought, you know what, we'll just kind of ask people if they've got questions and we'll see what happens. And I'm so glad we did. It's wonderful to see you. I'm so excited that you're here to join us, because I've loved all the conversations that we've had with you. And I think the people who've kind of been with us are going to really enjoy our conversation. Now, Ken, we're not doing things properly. Do you want to do your official start, or should we just get on? What would you like to do?
I think we do a little bit of a hybrid. And that is that welcome to Leaders in Conversation, which you're already in. And today we have our guest, Perry Timms, who is joining us. And our topic is flourishing organizations, flourishing people. The two are linked there. And what we want to do is to jump into things, and I need to pull up you know, some of the questions that we were going to initially start with. But Amanda, did you want to prompt folks with a chat question? And then okay,
totally. So I've got the questions in front of me. So we're talking about flourishing people, flourishing organizations, and what I would love people to put into chat is, what is their kind of view or sense of what does it mean for you to flourish? So how do you know if you're flourishing? What does it feel like? What does it look like? What would you see if people were flourishing at work? Because I'd love to see what people's views are there about flourishing. And while people are kind of putting those things into chat, Perry, what we would love to hear from you, because I just love this concept of flourishing organizations, flourishing people, that you can have both, is not a binary choice. And so I'd like to know what a flourishing organization with flourishing people looks like and feels like for you.
Oh, what a lovely way to start. Can I take you back to the 5th century BC Greece then, in that case? Because that's when the term eudaimonia was apparently first coined. Now, I'd never even heard of the word eudaimonia until about 8 years ago, when I came across a fantastic technology entrepreneurial CEO from Madison, Wisconsin, so you're part of the world, Ken, and he called himself the Chief Eudaimonia Officer. And of course, I was the Chief Energy Officer, so we were drawn together to sort of compare notes about how we'd hacked the CEO title. And so we spent a lot of time talking about this concept, and really what it is, it's an organization's purpose that we've seen a lot of people trying to talk up the purpose motive, right, and give it a real purpose wash. But it's genuinely something that exists for the good of people, communities, the planet. And at the same time, it develops great products and services for people that generate revenue. I mean, that's, you know, the sort of the engine of commerce. And within it is a sense of people who belong because they feel that calling, that pull, that magnetic north. And there are people around who they look and go, I believe in you. I trust you. I want you to be with me. And if you're down, I'll pick you up. And if I'm down, I know you'll pick me up too. And I think it's that sense that there's something bigger than you that you're involved in, and that the company stands for something bigger than just stacking up cash or creating a great brand. It's, can you create an organization where people are endeared to it, you know, and they're endeared to each other. And from that, I think, comes that sense of flourishing, which I think is a much deeper, more lasting sensation than happiness, which can be fleeting, it can be a little bit fakery. But I saw this sense, this eudaimonia, as just this light bulb moment for me going, that's it. That's what I've been looking for. Organizations who stand for that and people who want to be within that in order to make it come to life. So it's organizations with a soul.
Nice.
So seems like we ought to understand the definition of flourishing. It seems like a pretty basic word, but maybe let's expand that a little bit. And so if we were looking at an organization that in fact is flourishing, what are some of the signs we're going to see? What are some of the characteristics we're going to see in that organization and say, yes, that is a flourishing organization?
Great. I think it starts with a sensation. I think there is a vibe that is emitted from the organization when you sort of walk in and go, this feels good, this feels positive, this feels generous, this feels vibrant, this feels comforting. So I think there's that, but I mean, that doesn't find its way onto many key performance indicators, right? So if we then look at some of the things that we perhaps put on our dashboards, I see it as a place where there is there's low friction from leaders. There's not interference, there isn't dominance, there isn't overt and almost like fear-inducing target setting. So I think there's a definite look at what the success factors are reported on and how they're represented and talked about. And then, of course, I think there are things like decent, solid financials. I think that kind of goes with it, because if you're quite closely attached to an organization and you know it's not performing well and it's running out of economic fuel, you feel like that's not a flourishing environment and you feel tense and uncertain and unsure. So I think the financials are there to create a sense that actually we're flourishing economically. But that doesn't mean to say that we're just lining the pockets of greedy shareholders. Are we charitable? Are we involved in investing in things like learning and development? So you can look at those traits too. How much time, money, effort, and encouragement is given for people to learn? Because when that's evident, that's a sign of flourishing. It's almost a sign that when companies cut back their L&D budgets, it's the opposite. So I think it's some of those things. And one of the things I find really interesting in organizational life is how we create performance metrics. And often they're based on volume or turnover speed or whatever it might be. But when we start talking about, does my work add human value? Does my work create intellectual value? Does my work create social value? Then we can start to see if we can say yes to all of those. I think those are signs of a flourishing organization as well. So do people feel good? Are we cohesive? Do we bring people together? Do we make a difference collectively? And am I creating something intellectually that I feel like I'm passing on? I am creating wealth of knowledge that other people can feed off and learn from and grow and develop. So I think those are some of the flourishing signs. So I'm hoping that's answered your question, Ken.
Yes. Awesome. So Amanda, did you want to jump in with the next one, or?
I was going to have a look over in chat and see what people had shared, because I was thinking when I worked in an organization that I felt like I was flourishing, that was definitely about learning. And at the time, the organization was learning, it was challenging boundaries, and it was kind of had a really big social agenda. So a lot of what you said has really resonated with me. Melissa talks about flourishing being about how you contribute to the mission. And also agreed with everything you said.
Thank you. That's nice. Thank you, Melissa.
Rich is talking about efficiency and growth, and that growth mindset, because I think growth mindset is about learning again, isn't it? I mean, I digressed a little, but I wonder what your view is then about 10 out of 10. So in terms of, I'm doing really well, I'm a 10 out of 10, and whether you think organizations that flourish never see themselves as a finished article and you could never be a 10, and kind of there's a sense of stretch and growth, I think, but I'd love your view on that.
I like that you've reminded me. So my imagery has gone to figure skating. And let's just say we've seen some greats in the figure skating world, right? And that 10 board goes up, and then gymnastics and so on. And you can see the elation in the performer and in the sports person, because they're like, yes, I've done it. But I can guarantee you that the next time they step up, it might be a 9.8. And do they feel disappointed? A little maybe, but I think that 10 out of 10 is a fleeting moment. It's occasional. It happens sometimes. And you look at some of the more supreme athletes in the world, and they almost punish themselves on their training routines because they just want to be the best self all the time. And they probably hit a personal best in training, but they don't in the live arena. But deep down, if they know that what they're doing is just their best work, and at the time, if their best wasn't quite what got the 10, I think as long as they can look at themselves and go, that was my best at that time, and others may judge me differently. I think the pursuit of a constant 10 it's a bit like Michael Schumacher in the F1, right? It's just boring. That's just that sense of achievement. New England Patriots winning Super Bowls all the time, Tom Brady greatest of all time, etc. He loses occasionally. He doesn't always not throw an interception, but he knows that in the round, he's always his best. And the circumstances sometimes just do not allow that best to come out. And you've got to look at yourself and go, did I shy away or did I lean in? If I leant in, whether I hit 10 or 9.7, I know I did my best. I think that's the answer to that one. So I think you're right. I think there's a constant agitation towards the best, but recognizing that's fleeting and occasional and there for a purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. I tend to say to myself, progress, not perfection, because I think when you strive for perfection, I don't think you can flourish in that environment because there's too much judgment, whereas just kind of progress and perfect action, I think, makes such a huge difference. It
kind of becomes a bit hyper intense, don't you think? It almost becomes so dominant that you forget the reason you want to do that in the first place. So I love that Japanese philosophy of when crockery breaks, they fill it with gold. You know, it's kind of that. You know, it's like just accept flaws, but they're elegant in their own way. I think there's something really nice about saying, I'll never be as good as I want to be, but am I as good as I can be right now? Yeah, that'll do. Yeah.
Can I ask a stinky question, Ken?
Yeah.
So my stinky question, and again, before you joined, Perry, I was talking about how at the moment, I think a lot of organizations are really struggling and a lot of people are struggling in organizations. And I've worked in, you know, I would say my best and my worst organization I've ever worked in is actually the same place. Backdrops of restructures, change initiatives, uncertainty about role. We could add into that pandemics, hybrid working, where are you going to work? And I think when you are uncertain where your space is in an organization, where it's going, what the future is for you, and when there is relentless pressure, because I think Melissa asked a question about this kind of overtime bonus thing and this idea about busy work. How can you flourish when things are challenging? Because the organization might not necessarily be floundering, it's navigating a difficult landscape. But can you only flourish when times are good?
Really, really provocative and good question. So even talking to the organization where I discovered eudaimonia, you know, talking to Matthew, the CEO there are a ton of things on his list that they haven't achieved. And there are a ton of pressures where they've had to be quite, I suppose you'd say, sort of forceful in pursuing certain clients or product lines and so on. And that's always felt a little bit off-piste for their eudaimonic sort of aspirations. But I guess what happens is people kind of understand and they go, okay, this is a temporary shift in the dynamic. And as long as we can still feel that it's headed towards almost like a resurrection of the Eudemonic principles, then we'll go with that tension as a short-term, I guess, blip on the horizon. And I think we can all deal with that. Now, in talking about constant change and convulsive uncertainty and so on, I almost think there's a kind of micro version of flourishing where you go, right now, in the last couple of hours, was I doing enough to help me achieve the sense of flourishing? And that's not always easy to ascertain just in your own head, right? So sometimes you need somebody quite near to you and say, it's really tough now, isn't it? And they're like, yeah. And I'm really feeling it now. Yes, so am I. And I'm doing this as best I can. They're like, I noticed it's really good. I want to do some of that too. And you suddenly get a lift and go, oh, I'm doing all right. Because I think our calibrating mechanisms just get thrown and we suddenly think, oh, maybe I'm rubbish. And then that's not flourishing. And you feel the discombobulation of everything around you. And then nothing's even stable. I don't recognize who I am and what I'm doing anymore. So I think you almost need like a little bouncer. You need somebody else who you can just kind of assure yourself that in whatever opportunity you have, there's a little tiny glimmer of flourishing, even in being kind to somebody who needed some help, even though you had a busy workload. You should stop and go, it only took me 10 minutes. At the time, I was a little bit huffy, but I knew they needed me. So I put that to one side. I helped them out and I caught up in the end. It was a bit tough, but I did that one thing that I think is helping me achieve a sense of flourishing. We shouldn't forget those human moments. They're so powerful. And so the team actually that I work with, we had this the other day. One of the team's mum is having some treatment at the moment and it didn't go quite right, anesthetic reaction. And she was due to front up for a client. And straight away I was kind of thinking, oh, and I'm already booked for something else. What am I going to do? And actually, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, why am I even bothered about what I'm going to do? I've got to do what's right for her. So I said, stand down, take your time, do what you want. I'll step in, I'll cancel the other thing. And I spoke to the client who couldn't have been nicer. So from a moment of tension and thinking hyperactivity and what am I going to do, I suddenly thought, this is about human beings. This is about me doing the right thing for that person because that's the right thing to do. That always works. And that always gives you a sense afterwards of, I think that's the nearest I'm going to get to flourishing today, but that'll do. Yeah.
Nice.
So there's prioritization in there, right? Of making different choices.
Yeah.
And perhaps making the more human choice, you know, the personal choice over the perhaps the business choice, but ultimately, right, it is better for the business. And it also seems there's a struggle with metrics. So how are we able to know where we're at and having another person to ping off of, to be that sounding board or reality check can be a good thing. But it also seems that this is where people and organizations can perhaps lose their way because they're not maybe looking at the right metrics. And you know, I often use the stock markets as a metaphor. You know, they're up and down every day. Over time, they tend to trend up, right? But it's hard to have that sense of trending up, you know, when you've had a down day, when there's been a loss. So maybe you can speak a little bit to the struggle there with metrics, with measurement, with assessment, and how we might be able to maybe think about that differently, or some options for us to be able to have that gauge of, so how are we actually doing here today?
Yeah. I mean, that's a terrific point, actually, because whilst I talk about some KPIs, you know, don't factor human value and so on, we do put a lot of stock on what have I accomplished today in a sort of tick them off the list sense, or how much time have I spent in certain things. And so one of the things I'm starting to see, both in myself and in the work that I'm doing, is that sense of how long is this going to take? What's the weight and priority and significance of the work, and almost score it to then go through that process and accomplish the outcome, is sometimes when you get that little rush of, whoa, and you look back at the work and you kind of think, oh, that really is the best I could do there. And you track it back and think, actually, I guessed it at 4 hours. I did it in 3. That's pretty cool. I wasn't sure about my research and number of quotations I could put in there, but I got that bit right too. So you do need to be a sort of critical friend, analyst on your own performance, both in how long it took and so on, to match it to some metrics and KPIs that you could then sort of validate your sense of accomplishment too. So this is where I like the concept of performance management not being owned by a manager imposing statistical relevance to outputs on people, but as a flipped dynamic where the job holder says, this is what I think success looks like, both in a metric term and a qualitative term. This is what I expect to achieve. And I love how in agile scrum boards and the allocation of tasks is often done as a very social sport. It's very open. We can see progress on tasks moving along, and how that gets a little bit competitive, but not in a sort of dispiriting way. So I do think we need those indicators. I do think we need what I call punctuators of the work. Otherwise, you just steam through, end of the day comes, you collapse and go, I don't even know what I did, let alone what impact I had. So I think, Ken, what you're describing there is the benefit of a measure that means something to us and gives us a sense of fulfillment and sets us and helps us manage our time, our focus, and our energy rhythms, so that we can say, I'm at my best in the morning, I'm going to do my complex, deep work then, and then in the afternoon, I'm going to do all those nice relationship, chatty, and maybe sparky creative things, but I'm going to tag a few outputs and outcomes to those that mean something in metrics and performance measures. So I think the conversation about performance analytics, if you want to call it that, is something that I'd love to see people drive themselves more, rather than it be imposed by managers, leaders, even scrum masters, because they are important. They are indicators of how well we've done, like the personal best scenario I talked about with the athletes. You know, Usain Bolt likes to know he's shaved off, 0.5 of a second on something. So yeah, we're the same. We like to think, hey, that proposal, that should have taken me 2.5 hours, but I smashed it in 2, and I'm really pleased with the outcome. So yeah, I love metrics to play into the feeling and the sensation as a sort of a harder value that we can recollect and point to and give our sense of self, a sense of fulfillment. Yeah.
And
then
it's
brigade
also
up to the organization.
And you've also been talking a lot about measuring in context, right? Measuring
Exactly that.
How today is, because today's measure may not be the same as tomorrow's.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's where people get, either lost or struggle, because it's easy to kind of go to the extreme, the negative extreme of that. It's like, well, you know what, I just wasn't in the cards today. Didn't get the job done. Could you really have, right?
Yeah.
And so there's the need for the internal motivation and drive to, in fact, push yourself to your optimal level of performance, and then be fair about that, and then also keeping that in context. And I think that's where some people push back on moving away from those objective measures, because it's like, well, people take advantage of the system, or they're not going to do the work that they need to do, and they're just always going to bow off. And that's the argument for, this is why we need to have this very intense, top-down management approach to things, and have a lack of trust because someone will take advantage.
That's so well summarized. I'd add to that in discovering how agile teams work, particularly in product development, in tech, but anywhere, the clarity piece is so important. So the work sizing, in the sense of what we're up against, is so vital for the team to go, oh wow, we really have got to lean in today. And then people kind of say, yeah, and I'm a little bit off today, so can I do the gentle tasks, and then tomorrow I'll do the complex things. And I think this honesty creates a kinship across the team, that people go, well, let that slide, because I'm going to be like that one day, and I might need to cash in my chips with the team when that happens. And I think that's a really honest and candid conversation that perhaps doesn't happen enough about off days, on days. I mean, it's just only yesterday morning I woke up, because we've had some hot weather in the UK, which we're not used to. I had a kind of disrupted sleep, and I felt a bit flat, and I told the team that. But then there was a couple of pieces of work that involved me to be really on the A game. Do you know what? I came to life, and I said to the team, they all sent supportive messages and stuff. And I was like, that really helped me, because I thought, I'm not doing it for me, I'm doing it for us, and I'm doing it for other people. And it started to lift me out in the doldrum. And I suddenly found myself like thinking, I want to put in a shift now. I don't want to turn off until like the football starts. So so I really do think we have that variable mood or whatever that I think we can break out of with some of the stimulus that you've been talking about.
So I just wanted to pick up in chat that Stephanie has asked if there are resources that you know of, or a toolkit that would be great for sort of co-creating those performance analytics.
Performance analytics. Well, I know a great sort of repository of resources that aren't deliberately just for performance analytics, but they're really good for creating conversations amongst people at all levels. And it's the Liberating Structures website, which has some marvelous techniques for people to get involved in conversations about different things and different problems to solve, right? So Stephanie, talking to that, there's a technique called 1, 2, 4, all, which I think would be brilliant as a group of people to spend some time on their own, to work in a pair, to work in a small group, and then share that across the whole team on things like their definitions on performance, success, analytics, and key indicators. So I think I think the sort of smart objective setting manager done to thing doesn't really warrant itself the nice open exchanges that we'd like to. So I think let's break it out, make it a team sport, but keep the individual contribution to that then gradually grows through. So I'd say 1, 2, 4 all in liberating structures would help frame the conversation very nicely about performance analytics.
Thank you. So reflecting on our conversation, I think that you've talked about the importance for individuals and how individuals can manage their state and have these micro moments of flourishing and think about their energy and all the rest of it, but kind of bubbling it up to an organizational level. There are organizations who feel quite strongly that, you know, I've paid you to do a job, yeah? You start at 9, you finish at 5, just get on with it. So what would you say to those organizations that have that view of their human capital about why this is important? And I'd love you to share as well about what you see the costs are of getting this wrong.
Yeah, well, I'll start with that actually, because we've had a couple of 2 or 3 corporate catastrophes of recent times. So I think Wall Street Journal featured Amazon, the JFK 83 or whatever it is, the New York based wish fulfillment center, and just what's been going on there and the intense spike in work. There's lots of what sounds like pretty inhuman practices going on there. Now they'll look at the uptick on deliveries and go, look at how we're smashing our targets, but then the human fallout is awful. I mean, it's just terrible about somebody who was ill with COVID and whose benefits ran out, and this impenetrable chatbot system to try and get hold of an answer. And it's like, that's not how you create flourishing people. That's the equivalent of the human sort of disposable.
Oh, and Perry, did we lose you? You're frozen here.
No, it's getting really good. Wanted to hear what comes next.
Yeah, I mean, what he was talking about with Amazon has really been, yes, in the news here in the US a lot, and the very purposeful churning of people that, you know, they're planning for people to exit and roll out with the mindset that we're going to, you know, get the best out of them for this limited period of time, and then when they're used up, you know, we'll discard them and we'll get new. And that certainly is a business strategy. That certainly is something you can attempt to do. But, you know, you have to wonder, how sustainable is that? It seems a very short-term mindset to me, and one that, you know, once you have, you know, the word get out, you know, who's going to then, you know, be signing up to become an executive or worker at Amazon when, you know, the whole organization is designed to chew you up. You know, maybe it adds to your resume. There was a credit card company here in the US that did something at a slower scale. It took about 20 years to chew you up, but they would take folks right out of college, bring them right into the organization. They had no idea what it was like to work anywhere else. And they worked them every day, 10 to 12 hours, every single day. You know, what was great about it was that you could hit 40 and be a senior vice president and then leave and go to another organization and have jump-started your career. But meanwhile, you've lost, you know, 20 years of your life and maybe missed your kids growing up. You know, it was a really brutal environment. You know, but maybe you can make the calculation of, I'm willing to sacrifice that. But Perry, we lost you mid answer there.
I know.
You were just
Right
leading
in
into
the
Amazon. And
I was, yeah. And then I was also going to talk about Brewdog over in the UK, who just had an absolute cultural meltdown. And so, you know, on the outward face, they're talking about being a sustainable company and a B Corporation organization. And then there's 60 plus people who have signed an open letter saying you treat people bad, you don't do all these things you say you do, you're faking it, you're masking everything that you're doing. And so, you know, some people have said, what a PR disaster. I'm like, no, what a humanitarian disaster. This is something where actually there is a longer tail effect that will start to get people going, I'm not buying that stuff anymore. There'll be a trickle down in things like profit. And that's when it hopefully will start to hit people. You just can't keep doing that. So yeah, and there's no reason why companies like that cannot create flourishing environments. So, Amazon's famous data trails on people's time taken to do things sounds like such a fearful environment for somebody to go, I've got a bit of a headache, but if I don't perform particularly well, my stats are going to be down, I'm going to be out. I mean, that's not an environment that's conducive to anybody enjoying what they're doing or whatever. And a World Health Organization statistic recently I saw talked about over 750,000 deaths attributed to long hours working in hyper intense working environments. And it's like, people are literally dying because the work is eroding their own physical health. So I can see more corporate manslaughter cases being brought, and I can see people suddenly going, whoa, this stuff's a little bit too hot to not get right. Now, I don't want that to be the driving force. I want it to be the driving force where companies like Bob Chapman's Barry Waymiller organization create such a strong family bonds that when they merge and acquire, the companies are like, hallelujah, we're now in with a company who cares about us as human beings and recognizes the contribution we can make to long-lasting economic success. So we're starting to see some research from people like Amy Edmondson about psychological safety, that actually, there is a causality, not just a correlation. There's a causality between looking after your people and the company being sustainable, adaptable and profitable, if that's what the nature of it is. So I think we've got more maths on our side than perhaps we have previously believed is possible. So on the one hand, I think you have the economic case, but I think morally and socially, people are saying with their sort of intentions to work, I want to go with a company that I know is built on looking after human beings, developing human beings, helping us learn more about the world and ourselves. And so, sort of internal activism, standing in the space of diversity and equity issues. These things are no longer just occasional things. These are companies making very explicit stances to say, we're good people. We want good people to work for us, do good things, and we're going to create that sensation. Slack's chief people officer only yesterday was talking about they are going to force some of their managers to work from home for 2 days a week because they know they'll be irresistibly drawn in, and the pressure will then be for other people to come in because the boss is in. I really like that intention. It is like, do not create that bad habit. It's like eating junk food in front of them. People go, oh, it's okay to eat junk food. No, it's not. So I really like the fact that I think we've got some intention behind some of this humanizing elements within the workplace. And there was a research study done on the Dutch nursing organization Buurtzorg, who are self-managed. They don't have any bureaucracy or friction. They're the top employer in the Netherlands year on year, about their operating model. Is it more costly to be human than have mechanical KPIs like the rest of the Dutch healthcare system operates? Absolutely not at all. Completely comparable. So what you invest in people, learning, autonomy, and so on, might sound like it's more in terms of capital, both physical and human, but the returns, the yields, and actually the overall economic operation is no more expensive. So if people think that's too costly to spend all that time talking to people and developing them, no, absolutely not. It is exactly the same operating costs. It's more optimal. It's just more human. So I think we've got some economics on our side, Amanda, and I think they're going to emerge even more strongly as more companies stand in this space and prove it.
So I've got an eye on the time. And one thing that we like to do when we get towards the kind of last quarter of our conversations is to leave people with some really practical things they can do. So if I was somebody who was leading people, managing a team, and I wanted to do some things that are going to help my people flourish, what would you recommend would be the best actions to take?
Yeah, brilliant question. I think actually a lot of this rests at team level. As I said earlier on, I think that construct has been somewhat undermanaged and is just a collection of people under one supervision routine. No, it's a group of people who need to come together, work together, support each other and develop each other. So I think we can so the first thing I'd say is get the team to kind of recontract with each other. What do they agree are the principles of how we operate, how we show up, what we expect of each other? And that might sound like, oh, why do you want to recontract? It's just clarity. It's just understanding and surface what we almost have as osmosis learned things. make them real, name them, at team gatherings go, how are we doing on our team agreements? How are we showing up on the principles we want to uphold as a team of people in this together? So I'd say do that. Team agreements, start with that. Then I think there is something about individuals understanding their level of accountability. And that's really important, because I think when people need to flourish, they need to know, but what am I actually here for? Talking to Ken's point, you know, what's my contractual obligations and the other things I bring to the job? What am I accountable for? So if I spot a problem, am I accountable to solve that, or am I accountable to raise that, or what do I do? So I think we in a manager role and a team role can just have that conversation to manage those expectations, because some people flourish because they can get their hands on a problem. Some people flourish because they feel like they can connect the right people to solve the problem. If we don't clarify that, they won't flourish. So I think there's something about that. And then I think there's something about a values-based conversation. You've got company values, of course. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what values and value do people have inside themselves that they can talk about amongst the team and kind of go, oh, you're the kind of generous, social, giving sort, so am I. Now, how can we manifest that in the work we do, perhaps with early starters or whatever it might be? Because I think we need some additionality to just our core role in order for our values to kind of come to life. And when those values come to life, there's a really strong link to flourishing. I see people who flourish who've just got so precision alignment with what I can create value on and what I value about me, the world, and life. It's almost like it really is that laser precision thing. So have that conversation perhaps in the line. Don't just talk about your job description. Talk about, what do you value? What value do you create? And what else do you want to do with what you've got here? So a couple of conversations and a team agreement thing, I think, is where I'd start. And I think the rest builds out from there.
Brilliant, thank you.
And, you know, as we start to pull things together here, what are some things maybe that we can be looking out for? You know, some green shoots, maybe some things that we, you know, whether we're leaders in an organization or just, you know, a team member, things that we can look for that are things that we can enhance, support, you know, cause to grow, that will help us move towards, you know, that more human workplace.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, there are some clues out there in some of the literature from people like Gary Hamel and Michele Zanini's work in Humanocracy, and they talk about Nucor Steel and how they've created this environment where steel workers can innovate. You know, spot those, spot your company's attention to innovation. How's it done? Is it incubated by some, you know, specific individuals, or is there a sense of innovation as a culture that anybody can step into? Because I think those are examples where the company is saying, we can flourish through you flourishing through innovation and problem solving. So I think there's something about the systems you can look at for things like innovation, engagement, inclusion. And I think the human resource function has a lot to offer in terms of how it can respond to what people need, like flexible working, and hybrid is a classic example. We could go in position 2-3 days, but we could also create something where teams work it out amongst themselves and create almost like a patchwork of how they're going to manage that. So I think how much is turned over to people to make decisions and create some change is a really good indicator to look out for. So if you don't have enough of that, find some leaders who are willing to sort of sponsor some space for you to show what that delivers, and then you'll start to see more human stuff like that coming in. And also those examples that are out there. If you spot a really great initiative, you know, like the Slack thing, and just float that inside the company and say, look, we're not copying Slack, but what's our version of this sort of thing? I can see the intent and raise it. I don't think that has to be dangerous or controversial. I think that's just keeping the kind of cranking handle going on restlessness about inhumanity in the workplace towards something more human. So I think we've all got a part to play. I don't think we can look up and go, it's up to you to turn us into humanists. No, we can all play this. It's from all angles. And the more we do it and the more leaders find there's a direct link to a better flourishing organization, they're just going to want more of it. So yeah, quiet revolution, I guess I'd say.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. So we will do that. And we want to thank you for being a guest today. If people were curious about the work you're doing, they wanted to reach out to you, connect, what would you recommend in terms of where folks can find you either on social media or on the internet?
Yeah, LinkedIn and Twitter. So there's only one of me on both those platforms, at Perry Timms on Twitter, and the website is pthr.co.uk. Yeah, I've got some YouTube clips too. So a lot of this I talk about. So if you Google me, you'll find me. And when I am available in front of the screen, which is normally all the time, I'm normally pretty quick on responding too. So yeah, don't be shy.
And so I'd say if you do reach out via LinkedIn, absolutely add a note, let Perry know where and how you came across him, rather than just sending the blind invite. Someone who gets invites myself, it's super helpful to know that people are reaching out to you because of the program here. So thank you to our guests. Glad you made it, Perry. It's all part of the human experience, right? Of the reality of, yeah, we run into traffic and things happen.
Thank you so much.
We're super glad to have you on today. And upcoming, we're going to do a quick little preview on July 7th, Wednesday at our normal time. We're going to be speaking with Ann Archer about mental resilience and well-being in the workplace. And Ann is an expert in that area. Doing a lot of work with the NHS there in the UK, and is just generally fabulous. And so we're looking forward to that conversation as well. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Perry, for being our guest. And we look forward to seeing everybody on the next Leaders in Conversation.
Thank you
both. Thanks for waiting. Lovely.
Right, bye-bye.
Bye.